I always loved Cartoon Network as a kid. As I was growing up, it was my favorite channel to watch. Even today, it has some good shows like Adventure Time and Regular Show. One of the newest shows on the network, The Amazing World of Gumball, is a cute and mildly entertaining show. Not really my cup of tea. It's a little amateur, but my little brother seems to like it a lot. One day I was watching Adult Swim when I realized that I've been up so late that I haven't even kept track of the time. It was already 4 a.m. I don't recall ever watching Adult Swim this late, so I stayed awake to see what would happen when it ended. A little bumper showed up at the bottom of the screen during a commercial break. It says that a special episode of The Amazing World of Gumball was about to come on. I was a little confused about an episode of a very popular new show coming on this early, but I was bored and decided to watch it, thinking it might come on later in the day so I could spoil it for my brother. Sort of mean, I know. The flashing and energetic intro theme played, although it was played a little differently than I recalled. The music was a little different, and the show logo wasn't animated. Its color were done rather slowly as well, almost like something the little kid would do on a doodle board or glow board. I ignored it, assuming that it was done just for that special episode. The title of the episode was The Grieving, a sort of sad title, but I didn't really pay too much attention. It begins with Gumball, the show's 12-year-old protagonist, standing alone facing the corner of his dimly lit classroom. He looks absolutely miserable, a far cry from the cheerful demonstration he usually had. There was no one else in the room, not even his best friend and adopted brother Darwin the goldfish, and the windows in the room clearly showed the night sky outside. I was really starting to get confused. Why would be at school at night, and why was he standing in a corner all sad and lonely? After about what seems like a minute of Gumball standing somberly in the corner, the scene suddenly changed. We were in Gumball's house. Once again, the scene is silent and a little disquieting. Richard, Gumball's enormously rabid father, walks in from a kitchen. He looks even more miserable than Gumball has in the previous scene. Richard isn't wearing his usual attire. He dressed in a fancy black suit, a little uncharacteristic of him. He usually a slob. He signs and slumps down onto the sofa and started crying, sobbing instantly, sounding like someone who had just lost something important. I was starting to get a little creeped out. Where was the silly, fun cartoons that I usually looked forward to watching with my younger brother? There was something completely different. I was beginning to think that this have been something the creator did as an experiment or something, a test of an animation of sound, perhaps some through. It couldn't have been, aside from the opening scene, which was still different from the final show. The episode has been much quieter than it usually was. Only substitute was sound, a little, very little music, and the animation was not anything to write home about either. It was done a bit like an amateur flash on Newgrounds. The character design were somewhat sloppy and rushed looking, and the real life background used for the show looked different. As confused and somewhat frightened as I was, for some reason I kept watching it. Poor Richard was still sobbing on the couch as the front door opened suddenly, making me jump bit such a loud noise, and Gumbel's mother, Nicole, a blue cat like him, stepped in. Like Richard, she wasn't wearing her usual outfit. For some reason, She was in a black dress with wearing a pretty black hat to match. Nicole sat down on the couch, conformed her husband, although she was looking a bit saddened herself. By the point Richard's crying has begun to get more pain and miserable sounding. This wasn't a normal cartoon crying on the show. This was realistic and almost depressing crying. Finally, after 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 what seemed like hours, the sad scene at their home ended. As it shifted back to the school, we weren't in Gumball's classroom this time. We were at the Principal Brown office. Nicole and Richard were there in their usual clothes, looking more normal and happy than they had before, but still slightly worried. Principal Brown, however, looks extremely sad. He quietly and somebody informed them that their children, Anais and Darwin, were not were not present after lunch earlier that day. They haven't been seen all the rest of the year. Nicole was it's instantly furious at him. She began spouting various F's and call as him that I don't think would have made it on a more mature program like regular show. I was laughing at this because it seems sort of funny for Nicole to flip out in this manner and start swearing like Sailor in a G-rated cartoon. But my outlook soon changed when Principal Brown told her something else after she finally has quieted down. His eyes began to tear up as he informed them that they eventually were found, but they have not been found alive. He then went into graphic and nearly nauseously detailed, describing how their bodies were found, their parents sitting on the other's shock. I couldn't hardly believe what was happening. How could such cheery and fun kids should show be talking such a dark and twisted turn? I was considering turning the television off, but I was too scared to be left in the dark. But now, nearly frozen by fear and disturbed instantly at the terrible things that he was saying. Another flashback. The scene was earlier that began the recollection by saying that the school has called the police department when when they first turned up missing, believing that the kids had simply run off and decided to skip school. They said that it was very uncharacteristic for both Darwin and Anais to go skipping school like Dee. Darwin was a little naive and a bit tipsy, but he was a good kid and wouldn't even dream of doing something like that. Anais is even less likely to run away. She was a straight A student, despite being only 4, which also trouble at the police. Seen as a defenseless 4-year old girl was missing as well as an older boy. The school has been discreetly checked, so the police started to search the heavily wooded area outside of the school. It took a little time for the police to discover the horrifying fate of Anais. In a small clearing outside of the school, Anais's head was found in a small box. You likely would have expected something like that to be shown the show's cutest art style. It was nothing like that all. Realistic blood covered the box, inside and out. Apparently. There was a note in the box, similarly written in her blood. It was never slated during the episode. What exactly was written on the note, but it was apparently lead to the rest of her remain in Darwin's heavily multiple corpses. What I remember most about the scene, how it was out of place it seems, all the blood and gore and from Darwin and the Anais slaughtered and dismembered remains was done in a very realistic and disturbing way. It looks like that the scene has been taken from a crime scene photograph done by a professional, not something from a cartoon. The way the scene was animated was different than most of the show as well. You may know that the characters from the series are done in the vastly differently animation style, from flash animations to CGI. And I think there's even the character done with something put their chin upside down to make a face. This particular scene wasn't like anything I had ever seen on on the show before. Every little detail on Darwin's face was clearly illustrated. He looks a little like a zombie. His face was very pale, and his eyes had been gouged out by someone. Anaisi's fear was no better, or was what was left of her anyway. She was naked, and her stomach has been split open. Her instincts were stirred around the tree and bushes in the woods. Duns once again, in the very morbid and realistic style. I was feeling very ill by the time this was incredibly disturbing flashback had come to an end. So I quickly ran into the bathroom to vomit. I was feeling better after upchucking, so I had realized that I have good timing to had ran to the bathroom during the commercial. It was that I noticed that the show has been running twice as long. It usually ran for 11 minutes, but this episode was running for about 30. But then I was wondering if there was any information of the grieving on IMDb or something. So while the commercial was still playing, I looked up for information about this episode on Google. Nothing came up. No information remotely similar to the plot of or name of this episode existed anywhere. Now I'm incredibly scared and wondering if anyone else was watching it. I quickly dialed my brother Larry and asked him to turn on Cartoon Network to see if he was seeing the same crap that I was. He was pretty mad that I woke him up at this hour. But he's a nice guy and told me he would see for me. I thanked him and stayed him on the line as the show came back from the commercial break. The scene was thankfully panned away from a horrific sight of a children molten and was back to the principal's office. I asked Larry if he saw some cartoon animals talking or crying scene since that was what they were doing on the TV. To my surprise, he said he saw nothing like that. Instead, it was rerun of an old Looney Tunes short. I dropped my phone and ran into the TV and turned it off as hard as I pressed the buttons, it would shut it off. I tried every single button, and none of them did a thing. I tried unplugging the whole thing as well, but nothing works. The TV stayed on no matter what. Larry had hung up, assuming that I was playing a joke or something. I guess I was alone once again. My door was locked from outside somehow, and the door to my bathroom was now locked as well. It seems that I have no choice but to call the police, since my other family members were gone that night. It was the reason I dropped my cell phone into a cup of Pepsi. I was very scared, and had no choice but to finish this episode. I turned on the lights. I turned all the lights in my room, and got under the covers, hiding like my little brother does when I make him watch scary movies with me. I had apparently missed a little bit, but Gumball's parents were still talking to the principal's Brown. So not that much. Nicole was asking him if Gumball was all right. Apparently, since she hadn't remembered him from when Principal Brown told her what had happened to Darwin and Anais. He looked slightly confused and shocked for a moment, and the stomach bug. Nicole screamed and wailed. while Richard quietly told him in a very out of character voice that they thought Gumball has got on the bus this morning, but it didn't seem that way. The police were called once again to search the building and the small forest outside of Elmer Junior High. They had found him in a Miss Simmons' classroom, hanging by the noose, with blood-covered knife behind him and blood covering his clothing. The episode ended with a shot of Gumball's dead body hanging there in the corner, fading to black. The critic the critic rolled silently, but not like the usual way the Cartoon Network annoyingly airs a promo that squashes half the screen. These credits rolled usually slow as weren't that fun to watch either. A little creepy, just plain white text scrolling on the black underground. I only recognized Ben Benjamin name as he was the creator of the show. The rest were people that I never heard of. The copyright notice at the end says Cartoon Network Studios 2001, which was incredibly odd. Seeing as the show was new in 2011, after all that was over, the screen went to static for split seconds, during which during which some incredibly creepy and shocking video clips were shown between static intervals. I can remember them all very clearly. The first was a picture of a person in a plush doctor outfit. Those always scared me for some reason, and the way that the person in the suit was filmed was just as bad a red light. Something that freaked me out incredibly was shown over the clip. The next was what seems like a video being played very quickly, over and over, kittens' faces being squished by a woman wearing high heels, which was strange because a so-called friend of mine sent me a picture yesterday of a cat being stepped on and kill, similar to the kittens in the video. The last one was the one that disturbed me the most. It made me want to both cry and vomit my guts out. It was my little brother, or at least a small child, who looks very similar to him being shot in the face by a person who looks like my father. You can clearly see the child brain and blood spattered on the wall. I begin to sob uncontrollably that the traumatizing clip so that I passed out. When I woke up, my door was unlocked, and my television was turned off. I went to call the cops on the home phone in my kitchen to report that I have seen a very disturbing thing on TV, and that my door has been locked. When they arrived, they could find nothing like that, like what I remember from the early this morning. I told my brother about this episode, and he fainted. My internet history was even clearer. They were angry at me and just assumed that I had bad nightmares. When I sure hadn't good things, I recorded the episode. The officers were shocked at what I showed them. One of the officers felt bad for me and took me out on a small diner, and I couldn't recollected my thoughts. At the diner, I remember that my family was out visiting my aunt, and they were supposed to be back by noon or so. It was already 11, so the officers and I drove back only to find a whole squad of police cars and even government agents at my house. They explained to me that my little brother was missing and that my mother and father were major suspects. I was freaking out and trying to tell them about the disturbing clip of the boy who looked like my brother being shot in the head, but they wouldn't listen. I stayed with my older brother Larry, who wouldn't believe me either, still insistent that he saw was an old Looney Tunes cartoon and nothing at all creepy and weird. The cops eventually told me that they would contact Turner Broadcasting to tell them about this incident. A representative of Turner Broadcasting came to my cousin's house to talk to me in the private about I have seen the experiment that night. He was very kind, and it would all seem a little like sort of front. After I could tell him that I remembered, he agreed to play back the day programming from when the incident with the disturbing gumball episode had occurred. To my shock, to my shock, all that was airing at the time at that time was an old Looney Tunes short. Nothing more. Nothing more. So nothing less. I slightly sobbed and moaned that what I had experienced and seen was not completely real, but no one listened. Eventually, I discovered Ben Benjamin had a Twitter account, so I sent a message about this episode, and this was replied I got. One thing, how in the heck did you find that? I never ever thought I would think about this old shame again. Don't tell me anything, this Sarah. Yes, that's my name. But the Amazing Gumball goes back further than you know. I used to have really boring jobs as a teen, as I sketched drawing of a Wattersons and friends. This episode you saw was never supposed to be seen by anyone, but me and a few friends of mine. It was very awful things to do. But we made the episode as a joke. A guy from my old job, who everyone hated, has lost a child to a crazed serial killer, who apparently still out there somewhere. Anyway, we made it so had lost a child to a crazed serial killer, so could make fun of how he came into work usually, crying like a fool, which is why you saw Mr. and Mrs. Watterson cry so much in the episode. I know I'm deeply sorry for what I did, so, which I tried to bury that stupid thing years ago. Literally, I went into my countryside with my mates and I dug a hole and buried it. What I don't get thoughts and how do you describe it? Okay, guys, I'm not gonna go and just I'm not gonna go just okay. Let's skip it. Now for the explain this. You have been waiting for the clip at the end. I don't know. I don't. I'm deeply sorry, from the bottom of my heart, but I don't know why those clips were aired. I just don't. I am sorry. I am. I really am. But me and my mates are just the one who made those scenes with Richard and Nicole crying. That's it. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I am deeply sorry. Best wishes, Ben Benjamin and everyone involved with the grieving. Thank you. Thanks for watching it. Thank you. Subscribe, like it. Thank you.